I am. It's a pleasure to meet you. We just met 10 minutes ago over there, but we feel like we've known each other forever. And you're going to feel that too when we go through these questions. She's very impressive. And, you know, what you were just announced, you know, when you're coming up here, that you had held steam roles at, you know, multiple different consumer package companies. And, you know, as you go on that journey, you take something away from each of those companies, you know. Kraft, PepsiCo, S.C. Johnson, now Pernod. Talk to us a little bit about what you've learned, you know, through those and what's been consistent in that journey you've taken throughout those companies.
Yeah, so I am a very passionate and, you know, this believer that we're in the human being business. And I think that's been the biggest common thread that I have really become to understand in my career. And is it okay if I talk about creativity for growth?
We can go right there. This is your journey. We're gonna do it.
That's the common theme.
I love it.
So look, guys, you know, I started way before many of you in this room. And we all talk about AI, we talk about digital, we talk about Gen Z, we talk about the latest whatever. Let me tell you the biggest shift that has happened in the last 30 years. We have gone from being a supply world to a demand world. What does that mean? That little device that you all are carrying around, you all are consumers. Gone are the days of barriers to substitution, you know, the Porter's 5 forces of competitive blah, blah, blah. Today, we're in a world where our competition are not other companies, but you. You can take that little device and you can buy anything you want at any time, at any price. And so this isn't about me making really good, pardon the French, shit, and because it's so damn good, you're gonna buy it. You could give a damn. And so now we live in a world of demand. And companies have to figure out, if you don't understand that demand and change how you supply to that demand, game over. How many examples can I give you? Blockbuster, Kodak, I mean, I can go on, right? So, why do I say creativity is the oxygen to growth? I am on a mission to get every CMO in the world to be CEOs. Why? Because when it comes to understanding demand, who knows it better than us? We are the whisperers to CEOs. Value creation happens in marketing. And actually, marketing is a word that I wish we would change. Because we're not about, I'm here to make advertising about what we can make. No, I'm here to create value. And so, for me, that is the common theme that I've taken throughout all the companies that I've worked in. And we are the ones that drive sustainable growth for a company, and we need to own it.
Amazing. So, as CEO, you have to balance what you just said, right? And, you know, for what it means for me most of the time, which is, you know, talk about profitability and margins and efficiencies and organizational changes. How do you balance what you just said versus being the CEO of a company, running that company, and also having the passion that you want that you just with an exclamation mark in front of everybody said? How does that balance occur in your world?
So I think most CEOs always put ROI, profitability, as what they are responsible for, right? That's the input. Yeah. Backwards. That's the output. The input is how do you create value to get profitable, sustainable share growth. So for me, I start with the input. That's how I balance it. And I refuse to run a P&L based on margins. I run a P&L based on top-line growth that is so distinctive in its growth that it creates premium purchasing power for our brands. When you get that part of the equation right, everything else follows. Share follows, profit follows. We're putting it in the wrong kind of order, right?
Yeah, the order is reversed
It's
in your
reversed.
mind. Yeah.
Now, the other thing that I would tell you, so I talk about my job is about ROI, getting it the right way. My other job is ROR, return on responsibility, how you make that money. And I'll tell you guys, in the last 3 years, COVID, now again, I'm talking North America, but you can talk about this globally, right? COVID, political unrest, social unrest. There is so many factors going on in this world. We need to put humanity back into business. And so the other thing I focus on is what, as a CEO, as a company, what's my responsibility to bring all of that humanity back in terms of how we give ROI?
Amazing. You know, ROI comes in a lot of different formats. We'll stick on that theme for a second. Like ROI comes in, you know, there's return on ad spend, there's ROI, there's a lot of different ways. You talk about the responsibility, new acronym for me, I'll steal it. You know, that's another balance, right? Because as a CEO, you have to your shareholders, you have a responsibility in that capacity. The passion that you have, the passion for what you've done and the journey you've been on, that ROI and ROR could change a little bit. So how do you take that responsibility in a changing media landscape, which is fragmented, scattered, right? And get across what you need to still drive. You talked about the little devices in everyone's pocket, which have the purchasing power, but you still have the ability to drive sales, right? But also be responsible in that sale. And it's more of a two-part question. That's the first one. The second one is, in this fragmented media landscape, how are you thinking about it? How are you actually taking your brand to market with being in the channels you need to, but also getting across the message and that you're so passionate about?
Yeah, great question. And I'll start with one example of where I told people not to buy our brand and our sales went up. Really? Yeah. So I joined Pernod Ricard. It's right before COVID. Me Too movement's going crazy. And we have a brand called, I don't know if you've heard about it, Absolute. Now,
Yes.
Absolute is a brand that's been around, as you know, forever. It's a brand of provocation. The brand stands for giving people who don't have voice. So the Me Too movement is going on. I'm 3 weeks into the job. I go to the board and I'm like, I want to do a campaign called Sex Responsibly for Valentine's Day. And they're like, what? And I said, yeah, I want to do a campaign that talks about consent and that it's not gray. So only a yes to sex is a yes. And you cannot use alcohol as a weapon against victims. And if you buy our product to do so, we don't want your business. Now, goes to the second part of your question. In a world of fragmentation, what works? It's the big ideas that are humane. That thing blew up. If you would have seen the conversation that was created, men and women, who was like, I didn't know if I was raped or not last night, now I do. Like, it created a conversation around things that people were embarrassed to say because they thought, well, I guess I was at fault when they were the victim. So if you want to stand for something and it's the right value for your brand, it actually gives ROR, and that ROR gives you ROI.
Wow. Put it hands together. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. You obviously are very passionate, and it comes across wonderfully up here on this beautiful stage. How do you push that passion to your team? right? I mean, it's creating a culture during a time when culture is hard to create at companies now. You talked about COVID a little bit ago. You know, we're a decentralized, you know, society now of how we're working, right? And, you know, there's certain days a week people come in, but to create the culture within your environment, how do you continue to push that down, you know, to make sure that your team from the top to the bottom feel what you feel, and how do you communicate that across? Is it hard?
Yeah, it's very hard. It's hard because, for me, it's not hard, but I think it's hard. I think there's a new form of leadership today. I think the leadership of today, because, look, consumers don't want to buy brands, they want to buy into them. We as employees just don't want to work somewhere. We want to buy into where we work. We spend more time at work than we do with our own family.
Absolutely.
Whether it's virtual or not. So, look, first thing, I joined a company that I believed in. Now, I don't know if you know my story, but, you know, when I took this job, people were shocked. My mother was killed by a drunk driver when I was 14 years old and she was 36. I had been sexually abused by men who were drunk. So people are like, and you're working in alcohol? And it was my husband who said to me, the universe is trying to give you a message. You got a seat at the table. It's time for you to try to change the wrong and make it right. That's what I did. And I am very vocal about what I bought into, because Pernod Ricard is a company, our mission, our vision is to unlock the magic of human connection in safe spaces, responsibly, because abusing alcohol is not what we're about. So I'm very vocal. I'm very vulnerable. I put my money where my mouth is. I support programs. I'll give one example. We work with an organization called responsibility.org. When I first joined the company and President Biden in the United States was elected, there was a $3 trillion stimulus bill that was being passed in Congress. And after a long time, it was passed at $1 trillion. But in that time, we had a bill in there called the Halt Right Act. And I worked with that organization like there was no tomorrow. And President Biden, actually it passed, and he signed into law the Halt Right Act. And what is it? Starting this year and next year, any car manufactured in America will have breathalyzer technology. And if you don't pass it, the car won't start. So if we think marketing can't not only create value for ROI, we can create change for ROR.
Phenomenal. When I tell you that, and I talk about you being vulnerable, I'll be vulnerable. If more C-suite individuals who had the ability to influence, outside of our own marketing world, it would be, we'd be a different industry. I commend you for that very much, very much.
This is why I want CMOs to be CEOs, because we work on the human side of the business. This is what we do. If we're going to make this world a better place, you need people in charge who are human. And I look to this audience. You are the future. And so put yourself out there. Don't think just because you're one person, you won't make an impact. You will and can.
Amazing. So, all right, you're obviously very passionate, which is unbelievable. And all of us get a little, uninspired sometimes. So, how do you yourself create inspiration? And for all of us here, this is really easy. I'm not even using my note cards. This is a simple interview for me. What could we take away from you when we're not feeling inspired in what we do, or we feel like it's stagnant, or we feel like we've been with, the company is going through massive change and we need to re-inspire and reinvigorate ourselves and our teams? What can we do?
Yeah, I would tell you, look, guys, what they tell you on the plane is what you got to follow. Put the oxygen mask on first. Inspire yourself first, because if you don't, you can't inspire anybody else. Second thing I tell you is inspiration starts with loving yourself. And I will tell you, that is the hardest thing to do. Perfection is a sickness. Stop trying to fit into someone's definition of who you should be. That's all crap. Really look into yourself and say, what am I about? And use that to inspire yourself. Because when you do that, it's a flywheel to people. They're like, whoa. So I look to all of you and ask you, how do you inspire yourself every day? I have lots of forms of inspiration. My children, oh my God. They think, mom, whatever, you don't know anything. They're inspirational to me. Things like Ted Lasso. I think that's therapy for the masses. When I'm having a bad day, I just watch an episode of Ted Lasso. I mean, look, everybody's inspired in different ways. I get my inspiration from the energy of my people. Oh my God. People are amazing. And the thing I learned in COVID, we are one resilient group of people. And I see people and what they do, I'm curious. And I learn, and I'm like, okay, if they can do that, the fact that I had a bad meeting with my chairman, who gives a crap? And everything in my life, let's be very clear, I'm basically selling liquid in a bottle. Keep it in perspective, people. And more important, right? Every problem that I have is a first world problem. Compared to what the world is going through, you do not let your problems get you down. It's going to keep you from doing such good for everyone.
I think that I'm inspired.
Okay.
I don't know about you guys. Great. So, if you don't mind, let's get into just media a little bit. Okay. So, converged world, streaming services are coming together with linear services are coming together. The fragmentation is real. Digital is upon us. It's growing. You've got to, it's tough, right? It's tough to get your brand message out there. It's tough to know how to get your brand message out there. It's tough to control for oversaturation against certain individuals, to create the incremental reach that you need to, even though there's ROR, there is return on ad spend, there is ROI. When you work with your CMO, when you work with your media teams, and obviously you're in a category that has some stringent rules around it, right? That you need to follow. How are you going to market? Where do you want your brand associated with from a content perspective? How are you trying to fight through this ever-changing world of fragmentation right now? Because you're a niche brand, right? And you have those restrictions against it, especially within sports worlds and and where you're allowed to be and sponsorship opportunities. But it's important from everything you said today that you're able to get your message across to the right people in the right time, whenever and wherever. So how are you guys thinking about where you want your brand association in this new ecosystem?
Yeah, look, I will tell you, especially if you talk to any CEO that did not go through marketing and you ask him that question or her, they're like, "Huh?" So that's problem number one, which is a lot of CEOs don't even know how any of this stuff works, okay? So they never trust marketers, which I think is so stupid, okay? Now, my observation is we are too, I think, worried about media out. Am I doing the right thing? Am I getting the ROI? Oh my God, what if I don't get my budget? What if they cut my budget? That's what people think about. Stop the madness. You need to understand what problem are you solving? Because everything that you just said could be a possible solution. But if you try all the solutions, you're not going to get any return. So for us, and I know this is, for some people, it's science drives art. Science drives art. When you know, we have so much data today. Predictive human behavior is how you do great marketing. And if you understand the path to purchase of your brand, right? And every brand's path to purchase is different. In the alcohol industry, what a lot of people don't know is that 65% of all shopping decisions are pre-planned. They're not impulse. Just that fact alone starts the media journey. Then when you go brand by brand, they actually operate in different occasions. When you want to celebrate, you want to drink champagne. When you want to impress, you get a high-end whiskey, right? When you want to party-arty, you're doing Malibu, you're doing rum. Look, everything has a purpose in people's life. And as a result, purchase decisions are based on that path. Then what you do is, now that you understand the problem to solve, then you go into the media world and say, okay, what's the way for me to grow? If I'm trying to grow share, what do I want to do? I want to suppress my users that buy my brand, right? And go after the users that are competitive. That's how you solve that media journey. So the issue isn't, oh my God, what do I do? What's the latest fad? Understand what problem you are solving through the science of your brand to create that incredible art of receptivity.
That's amazing. And I want to go on record for everybody here and say that I did my research on Ann, and I knew that I could ask her that question because of where she came from and her journey. So, you got to do your research before you ask the questions, because she's right. Most CEOs cannot answer what I just asked her, and that's what's so impressive. And that's why the journey of making a CMO into a CEO is so important, especially in our, in our industry today. So we have 5 minutes left now? 5 minutes? Okay, great. We have 5 minutes left. With 5 minutes left, we're going to open up to you guys. Ask us anything. Here. I got it right here.
Okay, so you've made, Ariel, by the way, with Brand Innovators. Nice to see you all. You've made incredible impact in so many different ways through your life experiences, in the marketing world, in the business world. When you go through challenge with leadership, how do you approach that? The things that you have done are so bold, but how do you get them to say yes?
So I'm not going to lie, passion plays a huge role, right? But passion alone is not right. I think we live in a world where we need more courage, but we also need to make sure it's not crazy. So, for many of you might know, I worked on Doritos many, many moons ago, and I remember the first week I was on the business, I went to who was the newly minted CEO of Frito-Lay, who worked for the newly minted CEO of PepsiCo, Indra Nooyi, and I said, hi, you don't know me, but can I have $5 million? Because I want consumers to make our ads for Doritos. They're like, what planet are you from, right? But then why did I convince them beyond my passion? Insights, data, analytics. This is 2006, guys, right? This is when YouTube was just coming on, right? This is where, Second Life, and I don't know, there was a whole bunch of shit back then. And for these millennials then were young, and they wanted their 15, not seconds of fame, they want their 15 bytes of fame, right? So they wanted control. So look, of course I doctored the system, and yeah, we got 2,000 ads from consumers, and 1,995 of them were crap, but 5 of them were genius. And so what I did was I pre-tested all that stuff. So I knew exactly how it would perform at Super Bowl. And never been done before. First year we put it on, number 4 in the ad meter. Then we gave them a challenge. We're like, if you can get number 1, we'll give you $1 million. 2 years later, number 1 on the ad meter. Now, it didn't cost me $1 million. I already took out insurance, so it only cost me like $10,000, but whatever. After that, nobody would insure us. But it's about, because you've got to convince the CFO and the CEO. So I had financial contingency plans, I had testing contingency plans, I knew my consumer, and the rest is history. We did it for 10 years, and we dethroned Bud in a different way. So again, it's not just courage of your convictions, it's about being analytical and science to drive the art. Yes.
Hey, Ann. Can you hear me? Yeah. You remember me? I do. That's funny with that story because you and I were on stage together in 2006 on the beach. I do. It was great. But I wanted to ask you actually along those lines. I think we were like marketing directors back then, and now you're, chairman, chief executive. Yeah, it's an amazing career. But and you spoke a little bit earlier about going from CMO to CEO. Would love to hear more about, for people who are kind of in the media world, how do you go from chief media officer or head of media to CMO? Because I think that's a common thing that a lot of media folks are trying to do. And I'm now an executive coach, and I hear that a lot. So would love to hear any thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I'm going to tell you, people who are chief media officers, digital officers, whatever, man, you own the keys to the heaven, okay? Because that is the most complicated world. And if you can stop thinking about your job as media and start thinking about your job as how do I create value through communications? How do I return on a business or a brand through communication? Because I know how that brand operates and creates value. That's how you become a CMO. And if you take that to the next level and you really understand value creation, then you get to CEO, right? The issue is, don't get mired into the what's the ROI of this program of, no. You need to get into the how am I building the brand and what role does this media play in doing that, but you have to understand that and the impact to the P&L. And if you can start thinking that way, you'll be CMOs tomorrow.
I got one. Yeah. Hi, David, also with Brand Innovators. We talk to our community. I talk to a lot of the CMOs in our community, especially over the last few years, about things like CMO tenure and how to set CMOs for success, especially marketing during a COVID pandemic, marketing during a potential recession, and all these challenges. A lot of conversation lately around short-term versus long-term, right? CMOs are often very long-term thinkers. I want to build the brand, build long-term engagement with consumers and loyalty, but there's so much pressure from the CEO or the CFO to focus on those short-term numbers, get those shareholders happy, the next quarterly earnings report. How do you balance the short-term and long-term when you're planning?
So, again, I'm gonna repeat myself over and over again. You need to be your best friend as a CMO. Best friend. My best friend was my CFO. I made sure that the black box of marketing didn't exist. It was transparent. So the CFO can hold me accountable, and then when I delivered, I held the CFO accountable of, give me more money, right? So this notion of the science of how your business grows. How much is through distribution? What role does media play? What role does innovation play? Oh, by the way, what role does competitive advertising play in terms of how it might halo to your brands, which happens, or vice versa? How much of your growth is controllable, not controllable? If disposable income goes down, does that affect your brand because you're a fast-moving brand? You as a CMO better know this stuff inside and out. Because when you sit down with your CFO and your CEO, you got to explain this shit. One of the big things that we did at Frito when this is what's called, well, a lot of people call it portfolio growth drivers or marketing mix analysis, whatever you want to call it. But you have to think holistically in the business. Just saying, I want more money for media is not good enough. It's a fixed pie. But if you can show the organization through your CFO that you're actually getting better ROI on media and you're getting less ROI on trade or price promotion, shift the money, people. It's a simple answer, right? And this notion of short-term and long-term, the answer is and, not or. So if you can really understand your business dynamics, then you can start making the language of, look, not only can I drive the short-term growth, But when you're investing in media or in marketing, you're building the long-term strength and health of your brand. So listen, CMOs, I love the art of my job. I do when I was a CMO. I loved it. But I couldn't do the art if I didn't have the science, because those people had the keys to the money I needed.
Yes, the MC.
Yes.
Not sure if this is on. And you've had so many years of industry experience, and I'm just curious your perspective on a big change that's happening right now in the ecosystem, which is retailers becoming advertising channels. Retailers have an unfair advantage over a lot of brand manufacturers because they are the distribution channel. Spend is increasing 20% year over year. Where do you think this all lands, the debate between brand media and retail media?
So very simple for me. You need both. Mm-hmm. And the art of it is, can you on a proprietary basis link it? Mm-hmm. So you heard before from the previous speaker, in a 3-tier system, I'm not allowed to go directly to the retailer or to the consumer. However, because I understand the path to purchase, so I'll give you an example. There's a brand called Jefferson's, okay? It's a very unique proposition that we have. We cask it in Kentucky, put it on an open-air ship, goes around the equator 3 times to mature. When it comes back, caramelized, gorgeous liquid. What we know is the people that love this are in a space, it's called the male happy hour, and they love to experiment in bourbons. Like, that's their thing, right? So we know exactly where to go find them. So you're looking for bachelor party or bungee jumping or whatever. So we know exactly where to find you. Now, I've stimulated demand, okay? So I'm like, they're like, I gotta try this shit. How do you then partner with retail media, maybe through a trading desk or whatever, and all of a sudden in the feed, Total Wines and More's got it on, sale this week, 2 for $100. Okay. But this notion of how you can link brand and retail media in the path to purchase, I'm in the alcohol industry. It's really hard for me. You all are not. You can do it much better than I can. So don't think of it as an or. Don't think of them as the enemy. Get them in to help you to do what you need to get done.
If you're looking for a Jefferson's consumer, you could also find him on stage at Cannes at Brand Innovators right now, speaking to all of you.
I'm telling you, man, it's awesome liquid.
It is unbelievable. So I think...
There was one more.
Oh, nice.
One more.
Ann says there's one more question. There's as many questions as she'll take.
Hi, my name's Gabby. I work at Factory 360. We're an experiential agency. And a couple of years ago, I think it was 2021, there was a decision to sort of lessen experiential spend and double up on media. And you talked a lot about humanity. And I think since then, that's sort of changed. But would love to hear the perspective on that decision.
Yeah, look, it goes back again to the path to purchase, right? It's funny, when I got into the alcohol industry, and I'm not making this up, I was told, because I was an outsider, right? And I feel like when I went into the alcohol industry, you know how you have that frog that sits in hot water and it gets hotter and hotter and hotter? And I walk in and I'm like, shit, this water is really hot. And the reason it was crazy for me is people in the alcohol industry are like, look, here's how you build brands. You get them when they're 25 years old. You can only build brands in bars and in these kind of big, events and, sponsorships and whatever. And that's how you market in alcohol. Well, when you do the analytics and you actually look at how brands grow, they don't grow that way. And they grow much more like CPG brands, right? And what you find out is every brand, and everybody read How Brands Grow, like one of the greatest books ever. Look, it's the same everywhere. Penetration, 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 penetration. Tito's. Who's heard of Tito's? Frickin' everybody on the planet, right? It's a unicorn. It's a huge brand. And even Tito's loses over 40% of their users every year. It's a leaky bucket. These are the lapsed users. So what you got to do to build a brand and keep it growing is to get that penetration back. So yes, experiential is wonderful. But if you don't scale experiential to get to the kind of numbers that you need on reach, just doing it for 100 people don't work. So I'll give you an example of how we took experiential and made it scaled. We've been sponsoring Coachella for years. And last year we said, how do we scale this that it really feels more like a campaign and not just an event somewhere, right? So we went into the metaverse. We took Coachella into the metaverse. And we created, unbelievable collectibles. We even connected the metaverse to the real world. So if you went into the metaverse and saw a great cocktail that you loved, that was being drunk in the meta world, but again, not real, you literally could go to a vending machine right there, click, took you to Drizzly, gave you those contents, and it was delivered to your house. So if you want to do experiential, there are some things that, yes, they need to be small and special. Luxury is a very different way of marketing, right? But when you have a mass brand, you need scale. So it's all about taking that idea and making it art, wanting people to take it part at a scaled basis.
I've been doing this a long time. Thank you for one of the best interviews I've ever had.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everybody.